Hello, and I don't want to make this video, but I will. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my beautiful freedom-loving friend, where we like to call out the lies, hypocrisy, and corruption of tyrants, highlight woke absurdities, and also highlight the amazing work of other freedom fighters. Why do I not want to make this video? It's because this topic absolutely sucks. It's heartbreaking, and I'm sure it is for you. And the topic is on the Nashville school shooter and the events, tragedy surrounding that. And originally I wasn't going to make a video on it because I see like some people are cool, having great perspectives on it, and then some people are doing basically coffin riding, just trying to use this tragedy to either get clicks, views, promote a political agenda, like, another school shooting. Cool. Cue the playbook of anti-gun propaganda. Biden's already done it. To me, that's all just distasteful unless someone has a real perspective to share. And I've got a couple things to say about this event, so I thought I'd make this video that I don't want to make. I guess setting the stage with the crappy details that you're unfortunately probably aware of. There was an elementary school Christian elementary school in Nashville, and an absolute psychotic lunatic, hashtag glad they're dead, opened fire in the school. And this is a 28-year-old woman, trans person, so it's a woman who pretends to be a man. I'm not going to use their piece of garbage name because I don't think it's right to give publicity to these kind of things. Even though this person's dead, there can be copycat scenarios where people say, oh, they got a lot of publicity, so maybe I can finally feel like I'm matter and significant by doing the same. They went into school, opened fired, and unfortunately 3 9-year-old children were killed, and 3 staff members, adult staff members, were killed. And then, good news of the day, the police did an amazing job shooting and killing the mass shooter. The first perspective I'd have to share is this is an excellent job done by the police. Now, especially if you compare it to probably the worst response by police to a school shooting, maybe in history, but certainly recent history, the Uvalde shooting, where police were on the scene pretty quick and did not go into the scene for, I think it was over an hour. I don't know how that happens. It just shouldn't have happened, but it did. That was a prototypical example of what not to do. Here, the police, they did an amazing job. The call from the school was placed to police at 10:13 a.m., and the shooter was dead by 10:27 a.m. So to those brave police officers who undoubtedly saved countless lives, saved many more children who would have been taken by this lunatic. I mean, just prayers, blessings, and so much gratitude to the police officers for not only doing their job, but doing their job so well, so brave, putting their lives on the line to save many lives. So if there was any good news from this horrible incident, that's the good news, and that's the only good news. Now on to other perspectives. Of course, we're going to see this thing just politically used for political motives from the left and the right, and I don't support either. I mean, I could sit here and say, like, dude, this is like evidence, like we should have armed security in schools. I don't think I support arming teachers, but I support arming security guards who are highly trained in weaponry. But I personally, like I mentioned that, which is kind of stupid, but I don't want to go into that because I don't think now is the right time to do that. And I've also seen on the left already a lot of like, hey, run the, like, good news, guys, run the anti-gun propaganda. We got another mass shooting, which serves our political motives well. Using a tragedy like this where lives are lost, let alone lives of children, to me it is just absolutely shameless. And when people do that, I don't care who they are, whether they're on the left or the right, whether there's someone who I think is an evil tyrannist, or I think someone who is actually doing amazing work and supporting the freedom and rights of individuals in the US. I think it's shameless, no matter who does it. Got to give it a little bit of time. Another point to touch on is the cold, hard reality of this lunatic piece of garbage shooter. It was a woman, and this woman pretended to be a man. So it's a trans person. And isn't it refreshing how the mainstream media doesn't magnify that? They don't do much, if any, acknowledgement of it. This was a trans person, obviously highly mentally ill, obviously highly capable of violence. So just acknowledging the reality, this is a trans person. Now, I'll be the first one to say it would be unfair, unreasonable, and quite frankly, stupid for anyone on the right to say, look, like this was a trans person, so that's an indictment of the whole trans community. Look how unstable they are. I think that's completely unfounded. But I think it's important to acknowledge the reality. Okay, this is a trans person. You got to just call it like it is. And to me, there's reasonable questions to be raised in this lunatic piece of garbage's case, where I've heard some relevant questions being asked, such as the hormonal manipulations that this person was on. Did that contribute to the unstable mind and unstable behavior? Because less than 2% of women make up mass shootings. It's just like highly unusual. Why is that unusual? Well, it's not because men are evil, though a lot of the evil people in the world are men. What's wrong with men? I might just become a feminist right now. But there's a distinction here. Like, yes, this person was a woman, yet because female shooters are such a small 2% overall makeup of mass shooters, yet this question does deserve to be asked is, were the hormonal therapies that this person was on contributing to the unstable mind? So why is 2% versus 98% of mass shooters female versus male? I think the hormone testosterone has something to say about that. Testosterone, of course, is significantly more abundant in men. A biological man, which I hate that I have to give that disclaimer. Like, we used to call them man, but now we look, hey, it's a biological man, so it's like a real man. Real men have up to 18 times more testosterone naturally occurring in our bodies than women. And testosterone is a hormone of basically strength and aggression. If you look at imagine a primal scenario, like we're living out in the wilderness. Men are going to be the ones hunting and protecting. Now, feminists, you could say, well, it's a good point. But it was men who were predominantly doing the hunting and the protecting. So if someone's trying to invade, you got to fight them off. Testosterone is a good hormone to do that. It makes you more capable of applying strength, of applying violence. So this woman certainly had I speculate here, I haven't seen her medical records, but it's very reasonable to speculate that this woman had way more testosterone coming into her system than what her God-given system was designed to handle. Now, you put too much wattage through the circuits, you can get some problems. And mental instability, a propensity towards violence and aggression, perhaps at a level beyond what she would naturally be propensitied towards. Don't know that that's the case in her life, but it's certainly a reasonable question. And I think that reasonable question just makes us wonder even more, like, okay, how healthy is it to take massive amounts of the opposite sex's hormones, especially in children? And then another point that's brought up just in the context of this situation that kind of points at more of a global issue rather than just this specific issue. Some of the gender ideology propaganda that we're force-fed all the time is, you got to validate someone's gender identity no matter what, even if it's imaginary, but you got to validate that or else you're committing violence against the trans community. How is that us committing violence against the trans community? Because they'll potentially commit suicide if you don't validate their identity. That actually turns out to be false. So there was a study done in Northern Europe, I believe it was Sweden, and what they found is post-gender transition surgery, many years later, the suicide rates of people who had gone through gender transition surgeries were the same suicide rates as transgender folks who hadn't gone through surgery. So the propaganda says, we gotta medically transition these people so that they don't commit suicide, so they can feel comfortable in their bodies. But then when you medically transition them and then do what's called follow-up studies, you find, no, it 100% does not fix the suicide rate that is much higher in the trans community than non-trans communities. So that begs the question, if validating someone's trans identity doesn't actually reduce the suicide rates, why are they suicidal in the first place? And that brings up another question. Are they suicidal because they're trans, or are they trans because they're suicidal? Live in this world for just a second. We're just getting curious here. I'm just asking questions. I want to be out for the truth of the matter. I think the truth is always what sets us free. The truth is what's good for people. If someone is trans and they're also suicidal, we could ask, okay, are they suicidal because they're trans, or are they trans because they're suicidal? How could that potentially be? So living in this world for a second, if someone is suicidal, that's someone who's in obviously a drastically painful situation. And when you're suicidal, it basically feels intolerable to live within yourself, within your body, within your mind. And of course, suicide, don't do it as a method of trying to escape this. But suicide is ultimately an attempt to escape feeling what it is to be you. So you don't have to feel your mind, your emotions, what it's like to be in your body. So suicide is a way to escape yourself. I think a very valid question is, if someone's suicidal and they're also trans, are they becoming trans? Are they switching their gender identity as a way of trying to escape themselves? People try to escape themselves. It's part of human nature. Don't act like it doesn't happen. Left. Some people use alcohol to try to escape themselves. Some people use drugs. Some people use gambling. Some people use overwork. Some people use overachievement as ways of trying to escape ourselves. So essentially, anything can be used to try to escape yourself. And typically, the more drastic the measure, the more you're drastically trying to escape yourself. You know, it's like working out too much to compensate for feelings of weakness inside. Okay, that's maybe trying to escape yourself, but it's not drastic. Becoming a drug addict as a method of escaping yourself, that is drastic. Going through surgeries and a bunch of hormonal injections to try to switch your gender to escape yourself, that's very drastic. And of course, the worst and most drastic method of trying to escape oneself is suicide. So with this particular situation, we have, obviously, this shooter was suicidal. They wrote a suicide note expecting to die that day. They likely knew the cops would shoot her. Maybe if that didn't happen, she was planning on taking her own life, but nonetheless, she effectively committed suicide. So if we could exercise a moment of compassion for this absolute piece of garbage who needlessly took the lives of children and adults, living in a world of compassion for just a moment. I got plenty of judgment and I don't like the person. Compassion for just a second. What if we imagine her life? Whatever happened to her in her childhood, I'm guessing there was some funky stuff going on. Probably some trauma. Therefore, this person, maybe their trauma's unresolved, certainly was in her case. So she's trying to escape herself. Probably did many different things that nobody ever really noticed as a way of trying to escape herself. And then maybe one day her conscious, subconscious mind took over and recognized, oh, I can switch my gender. That's literally changing myself. So if I literally change my whole self, then maybe I'll be able to escape myself. Unfortunately, wherever you go, there you are. You can't really do it, but people try. So when she began transitioning, the people around her, the community, the zeitgeist, the culture, instead of saying like, hey, I noticed you're trying to change your gender, totally cool if that's what you want to do. But instead of just mindlessly validating that, encouraging that, acting like, hey, you're going to be a whole happy person forever and ever as long as you go through these surgeries and hormonal therapies, instead of just validating it, affirming it. We gotta affirm the gender no matter what. What if affirming the gender turns deadly? What if part of this tragedy was the affirming that this person got? We say, no, like she probably wasn't affirmed enough. Living in this world for a second, what if part of what led to this tragedy was her being affirmed? Consider this. If she wasn't affirmed, and I'm not talking about bullied, being made fun of, or shamed for thinking she's the opposite gender, not talking about that. I think that's horrible. But instead of being affirmed, what if people had the eyes of compassion and actually cared enough to go beyond the political correctness of just affirming her no matter what, affirming her dysfunction, and said, I wonder if you're in deep pain. I wonder if you're legitimately trying to escape yourself and escape how you feel inside of yourself. Maybe you need deep psychological help. What if that happened? And what if that person got that help? So I bring up this point because I care about people. And instead of just being a coward and going with political correctness and affirming the hell out of anybody, even though it might be potential destruction on that person. What if we actually had the courage to be compassionate and actually care about them and wonder, are they deeply suffering inside? And maybe they don't need the surgeries and change their identity. Maybe they need deep healing, deep therapy in order to heal what it is that's making them try to escape themselves. So the question of curiosity I'm ultimately getting at, just to reiterate it, is what if affirming gender identity can lead to horrible acts, whether it's a person taking their own life or, in this case, the lives of other people. The narrative, which is highly intellectual, void of any intelligence or wisdom, but highly intellectual, the narrative says, no, tragedy happens when they're not affirmed enough. Well, I would dare say the narrative doesn't ever seem to be in people's best interest. So what if the opposite is true? What if we don't just automatically affirm? What if we actually care about the mental health and the emotional health of the person who's potentially trying to escape themselves by changing their identity? If we had the courage to do that, if the narrative, if society as a whole had the courage to do that, I just wonder, would the suicide rate go down? Would violent acts like this, the rate of them, go down? I don't know. But I do know it's irresponsible and cowardly not to ask that question. And I'm guessing that question was not asked in this woman mass shooter's life. I don't know that asking that question and having people who cared enough to ask that question and support along a path of inner healing rather than outer transition, I don't know that that would have changed the situation at all. But I do know they seem like relevant questions to me. So that's all I have to say about this really horrific event. My thoughts and prayers absolutely go out to the families of certainly the children whose lives were taken, but also the community, all the other children in this school. I know people who have friends with children in this school, and I don't know what the hell it's like to process that kind of trauma. But I certainly personally and would certainly encourage you to send prayers their way because I think it's needed.